Hi everyone, welcome back to my video vodcast, and today I'm going to do another subject that's not strictly philosophical but that we can apply logic and critical thinking to, and this is a concept of race or racism. And I think what I can show you is that there is no such thing, that it's an illusion. And so if somebody's saying we should not use racist words, we should honour people of different races, they're actually perpetrating a concept that itself is flawed, very debatable and probably wrong in my opinion, and that is race itself. Now, what is the concept of race? The idea is that there are different types of human, really, and obviously you've got, you know, the classic ones are white, black, Asian, which apparently is not supposed to be used, I'm not sure, and then there's smaller groupings within those or outside of them, like Inuits or Eskimos, and so on. Now, I read something once. It's not something I've come up with, unfortunately. I wish I could claim I did, but I read this thing disproving race, and ever since I've really thought, yeah, that's true. And what you've got to imagine is, say you started off somewhere in France. Well, there's France, there's the UK up here, and you walked all the way from there either down to South Africa, yeah, or you walked all the way from there to Shanghai, yeah, not quite to scale, but so here's South Africa, here's Joburg, and then here you got Shanghai, and this is France, northern France, yeah. So say you walked rather than flew, as we would normally perhaps do today. If you walked, how far are you going to walk every day on your journey to Johannesburg or to Shanghai? You're probably going to make just a small portion of that, aren't you? And let's say you can walk comfortably 20 to 30 miles a day, or 30 to 40 kilometres, 30 to 50 kilometres a day. So day one, you'll still be in France, obviously, and yeah. Now, do you think you'll notice any difference in the people from when you started? Obviously not. They're going to look exactly the same to you. You know, they're going to be French, they're going to be in the same culture, everything's going to be the same pretty much, yeah? Now, day two, that's going to be, you know, still going to be in France. Day 3, 4, 5, yeah? For many days you're going to be in France, maybe walking a bit southwards, then you're going to be in Germany, perhaps. Again, you're not really going to notice any difference between the people. Then you're going to go into Eastern Europe. Again, no great difference. I mean, there'll obviously be differences in culture, but we're talking about race here. You're not going to notice any difference. And in fact, as this person pointed out, you're never ever going to notice a difference from one day to the next, because the transitions are much too fine between the different locals. You know, there's a continuum, that this race thing is just a lie. It's really a continuum, and you would never ever see a difference in the race, because you're just going such a small distance that people would change so gradually that day to day you wouldn't notice a difference. And that proves that race is a lie, and that it's really a continuum with different then maybe we could say white at one end on this scale and Asian at this end, yeah, and then on this journey you'd have a continuum with white and obviously black. I mean, obviously you'd see white people everywhere. You'd probably see some Asian people on your journey here as well, thank goodness, you know. People are a bit more mixed than they were at one time. But even if you'd done this journey, 500 years ago, it would have been the same thing. You would never have seen a real difference in so-called race. It's a continuum, and we are all one species, yeah, we know that from genetics, and we are all one race, essentially, on a continuum. We know that the history of humanity is that we originated in Africa, as far as we can tell. So we originated, and then we migrated out of Africa, and some people went to the right, some people went to the left, and basically those people look more like white Europeans, so-called white Europeans, and those people look more like Asian people and Middle Eastern people and so on. Yeah, and the Middle Eastern people are here, they're somewhere on the journey. So in a way, if we walk, we're kind of recreating this journey, but in reverse. So, and that's basically what we see is the fact that we're all originated from Africa, and the changes that have happened have been very gradual and to do mostly with climate and environment, and that's it, as far as we can tell scientifically. So basically this whole idea of race is just a lie. There is no race. The reason why we think there's race is because, of course, imagine you're on this journey, you're not going to see any change in the people day to day or week to week even, but they are going to see a change. They're going to notice that you're very different than the local people. So when you get here to the Middle East, yeah, you're going to look a lot different than most of the local people, yeah. So, and of course, it's natural for them to think you are different because you look so different, yeah. Now, and obviously here you're going to look even more different than the locals than here. But basically, what you've done is skipped the whole development that humanity went through in its progress throughout this area, the original progress from Africa to Asia or to Europe. You're kind of skipping back through that process, skipping forward through it, and so you look very different, and but you're not, of course. And that's the same thing when we see a black person in the UK and we're used to the local look. We might see them and think, well, they're different, they're really different, they're a different race. They're not. It's just that they've come from one end of this spectrum and to this end, yeah. But if we walked all the way down, we'd never see a difference in race. So I think this is pretty conclusive that it's not a true thing. Now, what is also known from psychology is that about a third, I was taught at the university level, about a third of our brain is devoted to face recognition. And there has been a few cases of people who have had brain injuries or illnesses which have disabled their ability to recognise faces. So they've actually disabled that massive portion of our brain that is devoted to face recognition. And now we're not really 100% sure why so much of the brain is devoted to face recognition. I mean, obviously it's very important socially to recognise your allies and your enemies within the tribe or within the family, or whatever your social environment is. So it's also very important to be able to recognise facial features of animals, for instance predatory animals who might be hiding to to ambush you, you know, or indeed prey animals that you want to get after. So we do have this very complex, very, very powerful system of facial recognition. In the few cases where people have had that disabled for one reason or another, they can't even recognise their family members from other people. And interestingly, they cannot recognise racial differences, so-called racial differences. They just don't register it because the differences are so incredibly subtle that without this enormous system to amplify them and point them out and make them very clear, you just don't notice. So what I'm trying to say is that maybe a lot of what we see as racial difference, even if we did this journey, and what the other people would see in us as a racial difference, is due to actually how we perceive other people and how we perceive faces. We know from philosophy and psychology that colour is itself very subjective, you know, and of course we are talking about colour, aren't we, often in this field. Now what we know just about colour is that, then if we add in this, what we know about facial recognition and what we know about people who don't have this facial recognition system, we're starting to see a pattern around. I would say I'm starting to see a pattern, I hope you are, that the so-called racial differences are perhaps almost entirely in our minds, and if you know, that they're probably in reality very, very subtle. And much like, if you can imagine, we would look at a load of sheep in a field, and what we don't know is that there's two different breeds of sheep or races of sheep. Yeah, obviously they're all sheep, but there's a completely different sort of sheep in there. You know, they're on this spectrum that we've got here. They're all sheep, but we've got two types, one at each end of the spectrum. Yeah, two breeds, you could say, and they but we wouldn't see that probably. We would just see they're all sheep. But if we were a sheep, or we were a human being, if we were a sheep with the facial recognition equipment that a human being has, we would see them as individuals, each one of them. And in fact, farmers themselves do start to see their animals as individuals, even though someone who's not practiced in animal face recognition, and obviously doesn't have any particular interest in recognising different animals, won't be able to, but the farmers can, because they're familiar with them, and they notice their own massive face recognition and face exaggeration software is working overtime to highlight slight differences. And so I've heard again someone else say that if an alien came to this planet, they wouldn't know what the hell we're talking about with race. I don't think they would. I'd say they would look at a Chinese person and an African tribes person, and they would say, sorry, there's some kind of difference, what is that? You know, or an animal. I mean, animals don't really, I don't think, recognise this difference between human beings that we can, and it's probably because of these two systems in the brain. And as I've said in other videos, we basically create a simulation of the universe, of the world. What we actually experience is not the world itself, it's a simulation which is coloured and with exaggerated facial features, and there's various other things that our brain is filling in. So this is my explanation of what race is, and what I'd like to say is that be wary of this concept. Be very wary, because even those people who are trying to fight racism, and those of you who know about resistance and what that involves, fight racism, you're fighting a concept that even itself doesn't exist, and really you should be fighting the whole idea, or at least questioning the whole idea that there are different races of people. and that maybe this is mostly in our mind. The colour differences and the exaggerated facial differences that we see may not exist out there, may not exist in reality. They're purely perceptual. So thank you for watching. I hope that was of interest, and bye for now.